On a bleak autumn morning, Michael Anderson, a grieving widower, ventures into Cedar Grove Animal Shelter at his daughter's urging. Amid the echoing barks and chilly air, he encounters a pit bull with a tragic past, shedding tears that carry both pain and a spark of hope. The mysterious story behind Rocky and the healing journey that follows is about to unfold. Before continuing the story, tell me which city you're watching from. I want to know how far this video has come. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so I can send you exciting stories like this every day. Thank you. The morning Michael Anderson woke up on what would become the most important day of his life since his wife's passing, the world outside his window was painted in the muted colors of late autumn. Dead leaves skittered across his driveway, and the November sky hung low and heavy with the promise of snow. At 48, Michael had grown accustomed to these quiet mornings, though he'd never learned to love them. Not since Emily. Standing in his kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, he stared at the calendar on his wall, the one Emily had always kept meticulously updated with birthdays, anniversaries, and doctor's appointments. Now it hung blank except for one circled date, Sophia Sunday dinner. His daughter's weekly attempt to make sure he hadn't completely withdrawn from the world. The house around him felt too big, too empty. Every room held memories that both comforted and haunted him. Emily's reading glasses still perched on her nightstand, her gardening gloves draped over a hook in the mudroom, her favorite teacup in the kitchen cabinet. 6 months had passed since cancer had taken her, but Michael still couldn't bring himself to move any of her things. His phone buzzed, a text from Sophia. "Sophia, don't forget about Cedar Grove today, Dad. Promise me you'll go." Michael sighed, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. He'd been putting this off for weeks, making excuses about being too busy at the construction site where he worked as a foreman. But Sophia was persistent, just like her mother had been. "You need someone to take care of," she'd said during their last Sunday dinner, pushing her pot roast around her plate. "The house is too quiet. Mom wouldn't want you to be alone like this." "I'm fine," he protested, but they both knew it wasn't true. The dark circles under his eyes and the weight he'd lost told a different story. "Just go look," Sophia had pleaded. "Cedar Grove is a good shelter. My friend Jennifer works there. If nothing else, maybe you can make a donation." Now, standing in his kitchen with his cold coffee, Michael couldn't come up with any more excuses. He grabbed his worn leather jacket, the one Emily had given him for their 20th anniversary, and his truck keys. Cedar Grove Animal Shelter sat on the outskirts of town, a modest single-story building with peeling blue paint and a gravel parking lot bordered by maple trees. The sign out front had seen better days, its letters faded by sun and weather. As Michael pulled up in his Ford pickup, he noticed only a few other cars in the lot: an old Volkswagen Beetle, probably belonging to staff, and a minivan with a foster mom bumper sticker. The gravel crunched beneath his work boots as he made his way to the entrance, each step feeling like it was taking him further from his comfort zone. The wind had picked up, carrying with it the first few snowflakes of the season. Michael remembered how Emily had loved the first snow, how she'd always insisted on taking a walk together when it started, no matter the time of day. A bell chimed softly as he pushed open the door, and warm air carrying the distinct smell of animals and cleaning supplies enveloped him. The reception area was small but clean, with bulletin boards covered in photos of adopted pets and their happy families. A collection of donated blankets and towels sat in one corner, and a donation jar for medical expenses stood on the counter. Behind the desk, a young woman with curly red hair and kind eyes looked up from her computer. Her name tag read Jennifer, and Michael recognized her from some of the photos Sophia had shown him on her phone. "Welcome to Cedar Grove." Jennifer's smile was genuine and warm. "How can I help you today?" Michael cleared his throat, suddenly feeling out of place in his work boots and old jeans. "I'm Sophia Anderson's father," he said, as if that explained everything. Recognition lit up Jennifer's face. "Oh, Mr. Anderson, Sophia mentioned you might be coming by. She speaks about you all the time during our lunch breaks." She stood up, smoothing down her shelter-branded polo shirt. "Are you interested in meeting some of our residents today?" "Just looking," Michael said quickly, shoving his hands in his pockets. Sophia thinks I need... He trailed off, unsure how to finish that sentence. Jennifer's expression softened with understanding. Sophia mentioned about your wife. I'm so sorry for your loss. She came around the desk. Would you like to see our dogs or cats first? Dogs, Michael replied, surprising himself. Emily had always been a cat person. They'd had 3 during their marriage, each one spoiled rotten. But something pulled him toward the dog section today. Jennifer led him through a door-marked canine area, and immediately the sounds and smells intensified. Dogs of various sizes and colors occupied kennels along both sides of a long corridor, some barking excitedly at their presence, others watching with quiet interest. The concrete floors were clean, and each kennel had beds, toys, and fresh water. We have about 20 dogs right now, Jennifer explained as they walked. All different personalities and backgrounds. Some are strays, some were surrendered by their owners, and others... She paused, her expression darkening slightly. Others came from less fortunate situations. Michael nodded, trying to take it all in. Each kennel had a card attached to it with the dog's name, age, and brief history. Max, 3 years old, loves tennis balls, read one. Luna, 5 years old, good with kids, said another. They were halfway down the corridor when Michael stopped dead in his tracks. Jennifer continued a few steps before realizing he wasn't following. In the kennel to his right sat a blue-gray pit bull, pressed into the corner as if trying to make himself as small as possible. The dog's head was lowered, but what caught Michael's attention wasn't his posture, it was the sound. Above the general barking and whining of the other dogs, he could hear a distinct crying sound, almost human in its grief. That's Blue, Jennifer said softly, walking back to join Michael. He's our longest resident. How long? Michael found himself asking, unable to take his eyes off the dog. Almost 2 years now. Jennifer's voice held a note of sadness. He came to us after being rescued from a fighting ring. He was used as a bait dog. Michael felt his stomach turn. He'd heard about bait dogs, the ones used to test fighting dogs' aggression, unable to defend themselves, often with their mouths taped shut. Now he noticed the scars that crossed Rocky's face and body, the mangled left ear, and the sunken eyelid where his left eye should have been. People have a lot of misconceptions about pit bulls, Jennifer continued. Add in his scars and his missing eye, and most people just pass him by. But he's the gentlest soul you'll ever meet. He's never shown an ounce of aggression, not even when he first came to us barely alive. Rocky had raised his head slightly, and Michael found himself caught in the gaze of his remaining eye. A warm honey brown that seemed to hold worlds of sadness and wisdom. Something in that gaze struck Michael like a physical blow. He saw pain there, yes, but also a profound gentleness. And something else, something he recognized from his own reflection every morning. Loneliness. He cries like this every day, Jennifer said quietly, as since he arrived. We've had behaviorists look at him, tried different medications, but nothing seems to help. It's like he's grieving something we can't understand. Michael's throat felt tight. Can I? His voice cracked, and he had to clear his throat before continuing. Can I go in? Jennifer looked surprised but pleased. Of course. Just let me get you set up. She retrieved a visitor badge and clipboard with some basic safety information, which Michael signed without really reading. Then she carefully opened the kennel door. Move slowly, she advised. Rocky can be nervous with new people, but he's never shown any aggression. I'll give you some time alone with him. The concrete floor was cold and hard as Michael lowered himself to sit cross-legged in the center of the kennel. Jennifer closed the door behind him, and suddenly it was just him and Rocky, with the sounds of the other dogs seeming far away. Hey there, buddy, Michael said softly, his voice rough with emotion. Looks like we've both seen better days, huh? Rocky's crying had quieted to a soft whimper. His one eye fixed intently on Michael. I lost my wife, Michael found himself saying. The words coming easier here in this simple concrete room than they had in months of grief counseling. Emily. Cancer took her 6 months ago. We were married 26 years. He smiled sadly, remembering. She would have loved you, you know. She always had a soft spot for the underdogs. Used to bring home every stray cat in the neighborhood. As if understanding, Rocky shifted slightly, unculling just a fraction from his tight ball. "I don't know what I'm doing here," Michael continued, more to himself than the dog. "My daughter thinks I need company, but..." He trailed off as Rocky suddenly moved. The pit bull took a tentative step forward, then another. Michael held perfectly. Still, hardly daring to breathe, Rocky approached slowly until he was standing right in front of Michael. Then, with deliberate gentleness, he lowered his head and pressed it against Michael's chest. Something broke inside Michael Anderson at that moment, something that had been frozen since the day Emily died. He hadn't cried when the doctors had given them her prognosis. He hadn't cried during the endless rounds of chemotherapy. He hadn't cried at the funeral, not even when Sophia had broken down in his arms. But now, sitting on the cold concrete floor of a shelter kennel, with a broken dog offering him comfort, Michael began to sob. Rocky pressed closer, and Michael wrapped his arms around the dog's sturdy frame. They stayed like that for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, sharing their grief and loneliness. Rocky's scarred body was warm against Michael's chest, his presence solid and real in a way nothing had felt since Emily's passing. When Jennifer came to check on them, she found them still embraced, though Michael's tears had subsided. Rocky's tail was wagging properly now, thumping against the concrete floor. "I think," Michael said, his voice rough, "I'd like to know more about adopting him." The adoption process wasn't simple or quick, but Michael threw himself into it with an energy he hadn't felt in months. There were home visits to arrange, paperwork to fill out, and preparations to make. He spent hours researching pit bulls and dogs with trauma backgrounds, ordering books on positive reinforcement training, and watching countless videos about helping rescue dogs adjust to new homes. Sophia was overjoyed when he told her about Rocky. She came over immediately to help him prepare the house, bringing with her baby gates, dog beds, and toys she'd bought as soon as she'd heard the news. "Jennifer told me how you connected with him," she said as they set up a quiet corner in the living room with a plush bed and soft blankets. She said she'd never seen anything like it. Michael just nodded, focusing on securing the baby gate. He wasn't ready to talk about that moment in the kennel, about how a dog's simple act of comfort had broken through 6 months of frozen grief. He took 2 weeks off from his construction job to help Rocky settle in, something that surprised his crew. He hadn't taken a single day off since Emily's funeral. His foreman, James, who'd worked with him for 15 years, just clapped him on the shoulder and said, "About time, Anderson, about time." The day he brought Rocky home was overcast but warm for November. The pit bull trembled in the back seat of the truck the entire ride, but his tail gave a tentative wag when they pulled into the driveway of Michael's modest ranch house. "Welcome home, buddy," Michael said softly as he helped Rocky out of the truck. The first few weeks were challenging. Rocky was scared of sudden movements and loud noises. He wouldn't go through doorways unless Michael went first, and he spent a lot of time in his quiet corner, watching the world with his one eye. But there were good moments too. Rocky's tail would wag whenever Michael entered the room, and he followed his new owner everywhere when he felt secure enough to leave his corner. The first major breakthrough came one night about a month after the adoption. Michael had fallen asleep on the couch watching TV, something he'd done often since Emily's passing. He woke to find Rocky standing next to him whimpering softly, not the scared whimper from the shelter, but something different. When Michael sat up, Rocky gently took his sleeve between his teeth and tugged. Curious, Michael followed as Rocky led him to the master bedroom. He hadn't slept there since Emily died, choosing instead to use the guest room or couch. Rocky walked to Emily's side of the bed and pawed at the comforter, then looked at Michael expectantly. "I don't know, boy," Michael whispered, his heart pounding. "I'm not sure I'm ready for that." Rocky whimpered again and laid his head on the bed, his one eye full of understanding and encouragement. With trembling hands, Michael pulled back the covers and sat on the edge of the bed. It still smelled faintly of Emily's perfume. Rocky immediately jumped up and curled himself around Michael, pressing close just as he had the first day at the shelter. That night, Michael slept in his bed for the first time in 6 months, with Rocky's warm presence beside him, keeping the loneliness at bay. As winter turned to spring, both men and dog began to heal. Rocky's confidence grew, and his personality emerged. goofy and loving, with a particular fondness for squeaky toys and belly rubs. His scarred face would break into a wide pit bull smile whenever Michael came home from work, and his whole body would wiggle with joy. Michael found himself laughing again, something he hadn't thought possible. He started taking Rocky for walks in the local park, where the pit bull's gentle nature and sweet demeanor helped change many people's preconceptions about his breed. Children would ask to pet him, and Rocky would sit patiently, gently licking their hands and wagging his tail. One day, a little girl with braids pointed at Rocky's missing eye and asked, "What happened to him?" Michael knelt down beside Rocky, who leaned against him supportively. "Rocky had some hard times before he came to live with me," he explained gently, "but he's very brave, and he doesn't let it stop him from being happy now." The girl nodded seriously, then kissed Rocky's scarred head. "You're a good dog," she declared, and Rocky's tail wagged so hard his whole body shook. Sophia noticed the change in her father too. "You seem lighter, Dad," she said during one of their Sunday dinners, watching as Rocky carefully took treats from her hand. "More like your old self." Michael smiled, reaching down to scratch Rocky's ears. "He's good medicine." But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were still bad days, days when the grief felt overwhelming, when Michael would sit in Emily's garden and cry. On those days, Rocky never left his side, offering silent comfort and occasional face licks until the worst of the pain passed. And Rocky had his bad days too. Sometimes a car backfiring or a stranger moving too quickly would trigger his fears, and he'd retreat to his quiet corner, shaking. On those days, Michael would sit on the floor beside him, reading aloud from whatever book he was currently enjoying, letting Rocky know he wasn't alone. The first year brought many milestones. Rocky learned to play with toys, something he'd never done before. He discovered the joy of swimming when Michael took him to the lake where he and Emily used to picnic. He even made friends with the neighbor's golden retriever, though it took months of careful introduction through the fence. Michael started keeping a journal of their progress, something his grief counselor had suggested long ago, but he'd never managed to do. Now he found himself writing daily, documenting Rocky's achievements and his own healing process. Today, Rocky walked past the construction site without flinching at the noise he'd write, or looked at Emily's photo album today. It hurt less than before. 1 year after the adoption, Michael took Rocky back to Cedar Grove Shelter. Not to return him, far from it. They were there as volunteers working with other traumatized dogs, showing them that trust and love were possible. Jennifer, still working at the shelter, would often watch them with tears in her eyes as Rocky gently approached the scared dogs, showing them through his own example that healing was possible. Their story began to spread throughout the community. It started small, just local pet owners at the park sharing the tale of the one-eyed pit bull who helped his owner through grief. But then the local newspaper did a feature on them, complete with before and after photos of Rocky, and suddenly their story was everywhere. Social media picked up the story, and soon Michael was receiving messages from people all over the country who had been touched by their journey. Some were grieving spouses who found hope in their story. Others were people who had been afraid of pit bulls until they read about Rocky's gentle soul and capacity for love. Each message touched Michael deeply, though he still felt uncomfortable with the attention. The shelter asked if they would consider becoming official ambassadors for their adoption program. Michael was hesitant at first. He'd never been one for public speaking, but Rocky's calm presence gave him courage. They began visiting schools and community centers, educating people about animal rescue, responsible pet ownership, and the truth about pit bulls. During one such visit to an elementary school, a quiet boy stayed behind after the presentation. He had a visible scar on his face from what Michael later learned was a car accident. "Does Rocky ever feel different?" the boy asked softly, touching his own scar, "because of how he looks." Michael watched as Rocky gently approached the boy, offering his scarred face for pets. "Rocky knows that scars are just proof that we survived something difficult," he said. "They don't define who we are." The boy wrapped his arms around Rocky, and the pit bull leaned into the embrace, his tail wagging steadily. That evening, Michael added another entry to his journal. "Today, Rocky helped a young boy see that being different doesn't mean being less." As their second year together progressed, Michael and Rocky's impact on the community grew. They started a support group at the local community center for people grieving the loss of spouses, with Rocky serving as an unofficial therapy dog. His intuitive ability to sense emotional pain and offer comfort helped countless others begin their own healing journeys. One particular success story involved Amanda, a 72-year-old widow who hadn't left her house for months after losing her husband of 50 years. When she joined the support group, she barely spoke, but Rocky would always lay his head in her lap during meetings. Gradually, she began to open up and eventually started volunteering at the shelter herself. "That dog," she told Michael one day, watching Rocky play with a newly rescued puppy, "he has an old soul. He knows things we don't." The shelter saw a significant increase in pit bull adoptions, particularly among older adults living alone. People who had never considered the breed before were now giving these dogs a chance, inspired by Rocky's story of healing and hope. Sophia, seeing the impact her father and Rocky were having, started a social media campaign called Second Chances that featured success stories from the shelter. Rocky's before and after photos became the face of the campaign, his transformation from the crying shelter dog to the confident, joy-filled companion touching hearts across the country. 3 years after Rocky came home with Michael, they received an invitation to speak at a national conference on animal welfare. Michael stood on the stage, Rocky calmly sitting beside him, and shared their story with hundreds of shelter workers and animal advocates. "Rocky taught me that healing isn't about forgetting," he told the audience. "It's about learning to carry our past with grace and still being able to love. Every morning he wakes up and chooses joy, despite everything he's been through. He taught me I could do the same." Life settled into a new normal. Michael still missed Emily every day, but the sharp pain had softened into something more manageable. Rocky's presence had helped him transform their house from a museum of grief into a home again. Emily's things were still there, but now they brought comfort rather than pain. They developed little rituals. Every morning they would walk through Emily's garden, Rocky carefully avoiding the flower beds she had so lovingly tended. Michael would talk to her sometimes, telling her about their day, about Rocky's latest adventures, about how much he still missed her. Rocky would listen attentively, occasionally offering a sympathetic whine or a gentle nuzzle. "You were right, honey," Michael would say, looking at the sunrise. "There's always room for more love in our hearts." The crying that had characterized Rocky's shelter stay never returned. Instead, he developed a happy grumble that Michael called his song, a sound somewhere between a purr and a laugh that he made when he was particularly content. He saved this special sound for quiet evenings, when they sat together on the porch, watching the world go by. As Rocky's muzzle began to show signs of gray, Michael realized that their time together wouldn't last forever. But rather than letting this thought bring him down, he celebrated each day they had. They took more trips to the lake, spent longer hours in the garden, and Rocky got extra treats just because. Their story continued to inspire others. The shelter created the Rocky's Fund to help cover medical expenses for harder-to-adopt dogs, and started a program specifically focused on matching senior citizens with older shelter pets. Michael served on the advisory board, with Rocky attending every meeting naturally. 5 years after that fateful November day, when Michael first walked into Cedar Grove Shelter, he stood in his garden, watching Rocky snooze in a patch of sunlight. The pit bull's face was more white than blue-gray now, but his one eye still held that same gentle wisdom that had first captured Michael's heart. Sophia, now married with a baby on the way, often told him that Rocky had saved his life. But Michael knew it was more than that. Rocky hadn't just saved him, he had taught him how to live again, how to find purpose in pain, and how to transform grief into something beautiful. Every night, as they settled into bed, Rocky always on Emily's side, Michael would think about the mysterious ways life worked, how sometimes the most profound healing comes from the most unexpected sources, how love can wear many faces, even one with scars and a missing eye. "Good night, buddy," he would whisper, and Rocky would respond with his special grumble song, his solid warmth a reminder that even in life's darkest moments, there is always hope for a new beginning. And somewhere, Michael was sure Emily was smiling at them both. The conclusion of Michael and Rocky's story is not merely the end of a journey through grief, but a powerful testament to the healing force of love and compassion. After facing days filled with loneliness, sorrow, and tears, Michael finds solace and renewed purpose in the unwavering bond he shares with Rocky, a four-legged friend whose gentle presence not only eases his pain, but also inspires him to believe in a brighter tomorrow. Together, they transform their hardships into stepping stones toward happiness, reminding us that even the deepest wounds can mend with care and understanding. Their story encourages us to remember that no matter how heavy the burdens we face, love and genuine empathy can spark miraculous change. If this story has touched your heart, please hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel so you never miss another inspiring video. Every subscription supports us in continuing to share powerful journeys, from tales of overcoming adversity to vivid examples of hope and transformation. Join our community today, where every story is a source of motivation to overcome challenges and move toward a luminous future.